Hi, this is Derek from Fesliyan Recording Studio. I hope you're all doing well. Today we'll be going over the proper way to gain stage. I promise this is probably not my first video doing gain staging. All right, let's head over and actually get started with the gain staging, shall we? All right, so we are back on the screen here. So we're going to take a look at how to properly do gain staging. So when it comes to gain staging, the most important number one thing is that we're essentially freeing up more volume space. And number two is that we're kind of fixing the overall volumes of the tracks. Because sometimes you never know if something is recorded too quietly in terms of the volume, in terms of when it comes to the recording part, as that maybe someone that recorded it recorded the volume too low, or it was recorded too high. So what we want to do is kind of fix those issues and make sure that the volumes for each individual tracks on that mix is at a good volume level. So we're going to go over to our mix right here. Generally what we want to do is that we want to find the most busiest section of the mix. So in this case, where I highlighted it purple right here, this is kind of a good area, kind of like a chorus area where it's generally all your instruments kind of come into play like right away, or it is at its loudest. So by doing so, all we do is create a loop and just kind of go over and monitor how each of the volumes are for each individual tracks. So we're going to head over to my other screen here. Just give me a moment. All right. So what we're going to do here is once we have our tracks all loaded in, what we want to do is make sure all of our volume faders are at 0 and just kind of gauge and see and start to see how the volumes are one by one, and just make sure to go over each track. The reason why we don't want it to have too much volume is that if there's too much volume processed over into the stereo out, what that does is that it'll limit the amount of processing we can do, as when we do stuff like EQ, compression, and when we do delaying and chorus and add choruses, that they all do add volume, and you don't want your mix to be always clipping, as clipping will actually end up distorting your mix. Let's start off with our kick drum. We want to make sure we establish a couple things. It's loud enough, but it also isn't too quiet. So I'm going to hit the play here and just take a look at how the volume is for that section that we looped. So the kick is right here. All right, so we just kind of took a look at how the kick was in terms of volume wise. We're just trying to gauge the volume. So what I can see was that there was a few times it went over the 12 line here and got kind of close to in the mid in between 6 and 12. The thing is, it's okay if it's a little bit louder and it hits kind of close to 6. So when it comes to kick drum, the most important part when we start to analyze how loud the volume should be and where it's kind of hitting around, generally a good spot is around 12 for most instruments, including your kick drum as well. That's kind of a good area where you should be aiming for. As we saw earlier, when it comes to the kick drum, it was consecutively under this 12 mark here. And there was a few times it kind of just went over. So a little secret about kick drums is that generally kick drums are at its loudest when they first initially hit the kick. So we want to maintain that power of that kick. All right, so that was just kind of a little quick tip when it comes to gain staging and really monitoring. It's okay it's totally all right if your kick drum goes over 12 on average. Just make sure it just doesn't go over the 6 area, the 6 spot right here when it comes to volume, when we gauge the volume. All right, so let's take a look at a different instrument in this case. So we don't really need to really gain stage our kick drum, is what I kind of can tell. It's at a good level. Maybe I can even bring up the gain staging for that. All right, so I'll be looping the same section. This time I'll be looking at the piano, just to kind of see where it's hitting on average and to see if I need to alter that. All right, so you guys probably noticed that the piano was going over 12 a lot of times compared to on average. As I said, that a good volume is generally hitting around 12 or a little bit under it. But in terms of the piano, so a little secret is that when it comes to anything that's either a guitar, piano, violin, or vocals, or anything of that like that's in the higher upper frequency zones. Generally, you can just kind of bring down the volume as they'll come through a lot easier compared to like a bass guitar or a kick drum. So we're gonna head over, find the piano. So in this case, it's purple for me. And right now, you can find the gain staging ability either on Pro Tools, you can find it on the side there. There's like a little small volume dial. But for Cubase, you can just do it directly on the audio clip. So find out which method or how you actually gain stage on your DAW. Grab the clip. As you can see here, it's 0 right now. So that's neutral level, no alterations. So what we want to do is bring down that volume. So I'm going to bring it down. And as you probably start noticing, the waveforms are kind of shrinking on the piano. Now let's actually gauge how much the gain staging did for the piano there. So I'll loop the same area again. So we're just going to hit play and just monitor the levels now. Alright, and probably you've noticed, but the piano is a lot more quieter compared to before. Initially, the piano went over 12 a lot of times. This time it was a lot less compared to before. Most of the time it's hitting that 12 range, and sometimes it did go over 12, but that's okay as this is actually performed by people, right? When people actually play an actual instrument, there will be times maybe that they hit the keys a little too hard or too light, and that's kind of like a good indication that that's a very acceptable range when it comes to piano. And essentially when it comes to gain staging, you kind of want to follow through and go through each instrument by doing the same thing as what we just did here today for the piano and the kick drum. All right, so that wraps it up for today. Thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope you like what you saw today. If you did